and welcome to today's Knowledge webinar. Join us for a special Q&A with CAD Guru Jonathan Pickup. Jonathan is trained as an architect with more than 30 years of experience, and he has been writing and producing Vectorworks manuals and providing customer support for more than 20 years. His company, Archon CAD, is the premier provider of third-party manuals and training resources for Vectorworks. He offers monthly webinars for Vectorworks and maintains the visual knowledge base for Vectorworks. And now let me tell you a little bit about Novage and the things we have in store for you today. So as you can see, we have a promo going on. It's a flash promo, 40% off of new license and upgrades if you buy them with a full VSS license. And this discount can be combined with our live promo code that I've been sharing with you, and it's also in our chat box. It will be valid today only from now until 6 p.m. Pacific time. So, and the two promo can be combined. So, yeah, great news for savings. Novage is changing the way designers purchase 3D software, offering more choices, more freedom, best advice, and faster service. I'm going to leave my slides here and remind you at the end how to get the promo code. And I will now share Jonathan's screen so he can start
Oh,
answering
here
the
it comes.
question.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention. There we are. You can see my screen. So this is my visual knowledge base. I just thought I'd make sure I had that up. Someone asked about stories. So I think, Barbara, we'll talk about stories to start with. They could take quite a long time to go through stories. And so I had a quick look through my knowledge base to see what I've got in terms of stories. And this is my old website, which had a manual on stories. We're going to cover stories, I think, with my group this year. So I'm going to rewrite this one on levels, layers, levels, and stories. They all work together, these different things. I did cover it as a workshop, but what I was looking for was this. And I'm missing the really good images that go with it for some reason. I don't know where they've gone, but I'm going to come back to stories. We're going to go through some of the stories. We also had a question. Someone kept asking on different improvements for Vectorworks. Now there is a public roadmap that Vectorworks shared with people. Here it is. Here, that's a public roadmap. I've got it open somewhere, and it tells people what's coming up, what Vectorworks think that they need to work on mostly. And you can see there's a lot of different things. There's updates to windows and doors. They're going to expand site modifiers. They're going to improve the interface. The things in develop would be modernizing walls, 3D modeling, the stair tool they think that they're going to work on, and they're researching different things. So they've got them in groups here, so you can see what sort of things they're researching. Things like roadways, room finishes. So there's a lot of information available there, and where I got it from was the Vectorworks community board, and I just searched public roadmap, and it came up with this public roadmap, and so you can read about that. If I knew of something a little bit more detailed, Jim, I wouldn't be able to tell you because I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, so I can only tell you stuff that's public. But one of the things I thought we could look at would be stories. I think that stories are really useful when you use them correctly. But if you don't use them correctly or you don't understand what they're for, they can be quite challenging in understanding what we might want to use stories for. I've tended to write manuals in the past, and I think I've still got a manual in the past that did deal with stories. This one here, I think there's a manual. And I think I posted a lot of images in here to try and explain what the relationship is between a layer, a level, and a story. And I guess you could say, first of all, that a story is a collection of levels and layers. I'm just zooming that out a bit. So this is slightly old because it's from 2015. But it was, and I go through what layers and classes are designed for. So let's skip down to where we get to levels. Okay, so this is probably a really good way to start thinking about stories and layers and levels. And I tend to call stories a collection of design layers together. So that, for example, in this case here, we've got the foundations as one level, one design layer. We've got floor one as one design layer, but combined together, they make up story one. And story two might be the floor and the ceiling collected together. And if you want to then start to move the relationship between story one and story two, the stories become extremely useful because you're moving all of the stories in story two up. We can just change the relationship and it'll move all of those things together. And we can then connect things like walls and stairs between the different stories. We can connect, you might notice that I've actually created a series of levels as well. If you do it well, then it becomes very useful to do things like setting a ceiling level, setting a skirting level or a baseboard level, doing things like the top of the footing or the bottom of the footing, and we can then get Vectorworks to automatically create objects that fit between or relate to those particular levels. So step number one, Jim, is that it's a story as a collection of design layers. Step number two, we have a layer, floor one, and inside that layer we have a series of levels. So we can have a level for the ceiling, we can have a level for the baseboard, and so on. And that's how I tend to think of them. But if we look at it in detail, we can start to use levels to control individual parts of our construction, individual parts of our slabs, walls. Even so, in this case here, I tend to use a level sometimes on some projects, not all projects, but sometimes I use the bottom of the cladding as a level that will control the bottom edge of my cladding relative to that layer. And that becomes really useful because then I can start to say, I want this to be a certain distance down on this particular story, but on the next story above, I might want to have that bottom of cladding at a different height or a different elevation. And that can be quite useful because each level, when you go to a new story, has its own height. And it can be, as I said, I think it can be really quite useful. But if we go back to this, you'll notice that there's a long horizontal line through here, which is my layer elevation. In other words, it's my datum for that story. I like to put the datum at the finished floor level, so everything above is positive and everything below is negative. That helps me when I come to put things like the top of the footing and the bottom of the footing. I make those relative to this datum height here, which works quite well. I'm just going to make sure I'm reading the stories. Yeah, so why are stories so the question is, why are stories so complicated? I think that when stories first came out, Jim, there was a lot of discussion about whether stories were complicated, whether they were doing the job they were intended to do, whether you needed to use them or not. And there are lots of projects where I don't use stories because the people I'm working with find it complicated to deal with these stories. When I use the standard Vectorworks, I'm not sure whether I've edited this one. I quite often edit my template so it suits me. Let's look at stories and let's look at my default story levels. So if we look at my default story levels, this is, I think, this is my edited one. So I've gone through and I've edited all of my levels. You'll see that they've got specific names that relate to the picture that I just showed you. If I start a brand new blank file, so let's go, just bring on my dialog boxes. All my dialog boxes are on the other screen at the moment. Let's create a blank template. Let's create stories, default story levels. They used to have funny things like ledge, which I couldn't understand. Top of slab now makes more sense. It used to be I think it used to be called top of structure or something, and I didn't know whether it was a piece of a roof or something else. So over the years, Vectorworks have changed these, but I still use my standard. Here we are. I still use my names because my names make sense to me. And I think you need to use use levels that make sense to you. You'll notice that some particular levels are associated to a layer. So foundation, slab is associated with a layer, the roof is associated with a layer, finished floor is associated with a layer, and so on. But things like bottom of cladding, top of footing, bottom of footing, these are not associated with a layer. You can see there's no layer name just here. And so they're really used to control the elevation of specific parts of my building. It's probably, Jim, if you want to make stories less complicated, the idea would be to create your own template, creating the levels that you find really useful, because that would make it easy for you. The next step is when you use a series of walls, for example, or stairs, that you then connect those stairs and walls to these components or these levels. And if you don't, then you'll see if I try and use a wall in some files, I've got my wall styles connected to these levels. When the levels don't exist, I end up with very short walls. They all end up defaulting to 0. So someone's sent a message. So Jim, yeah, I think it's the naming convention that throws most people, because they used to have, I don't want to call them silly names, but they were names that didn't make sense to me. Things like ledge. What the heck is a ledge? I mean, is it something that brick sits on, or is it something high? Why not call it what it really is? So Jim, one of the things I like to do is to make sure that my names are short but descriptive. And I think, Jim, if I call a level bottom of footing, it's pretty clear what I'm using it for. And if I call it top of footing, I think it's pretty clear. And bottom of cladding, again, I think is clear. So what you do need to do is, I think you need to look at this kind of sketch through your building and start to look at, well, what am I using levels for? Am I using them to control the top of the slab or the bottom of the slab? I mean, do you really need those 2 levels? Because you can quite happily put the top of the slab at 0 as finished floor level. Let me have a look. So I've written a document here, Jim, all about setting up your system. This is one of my older manuals. And it talks about using the layers or using the level names that make sense to you. So you can see if I've got a wall that's got 2 heights of cladding, I've got one called top of cladding, bottom of cladding, top of cladding, and there's another one which is the layer wall height, main ceiling level. I did think, in my own personal use, that levels tend to suit more commercial projects than a standard single-story house, for example. I've done lots of complex houses recently, and we didn't use levels because the architects that I'm working for don't like using them. They find them complicated, so I've tended to use other methods, which seems to work pretty well anyway. But you do have this ability when you're creating walls to bound the top of the wall to a level, and therefore when you change that level, that wall will automatically move, and it can be extremely quick if you set these up correctly. But the downside, of course, is that you have to set them up so that everybody's using them the same way. Now, I'm looking here at my default story levels, and the default story levels is the place to change the names. If you don't change them in the default story levels, then next time, so let's cancel that. Let's go to story 1. You can see I've got all these things in here. Let's edit one of those and we'll change, what should we add? Should we add, we got top of clad, we haven't got top of cladding. Oh yeah, top of cladding's already there. So I'm going to create a new level and I'm going to call it something. So I need to create a new level type. I'm going to call this my light switch, lights. Lights will be another one, Jim, where you can create a level called something like lights. And then when you create a symbol, you can tell the symbol to connect to this level. So that, for example, all of your light switches, I'm going to call it electric switches. No, light switches will do. Light switches. Okay, so the elevation for a light switch is around about what? I'm not sure what it is. It's less than 5 feet. So it's probably about 4 feet, 1200 millimeters. I'll make it 4 feet. 4 feet. So there's my light switch. It's around about 1219 millimeters, 4 feet high. Great. Let's go to story 2 and let's edit that one. Let's turn on the light switch. Oh, it's not there. It's not one of my default levels, which is a problem. So if you create your level in the wrong place, you can't create your level easily on the next story. So let's cancel that and we'll do it again. So back to that. Stories. Here, we're going to now edit our default story levels. We'll create a new one. And this is going to be my light switches. Light switches. Elevation, 1250. Okay. Now, when we edit this, so I'm now in story 1. We edit story 1. Oh, look, light switches, so I just turn it on. Let's go to story 2. Light switches, let's just turn that one on too. Yes. So does that make sense? Oh, 44 inches. Yeah, I'm not sure what that is. But I can change that and make it 44 inches. Which made it, oh, I was close. Wasn't too far out. So does that make sense, Jim, that you can do that with that, use that system? So I've got another thing that I use, Jim, whenever something gets complicated, and that is to keep it simple. And you always have to keep stuff as simple as possible. If you try to use things in a complicated way, in a complex way, it can be a bit of a nightmare. Okay, so let's do a light switch. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a rectangle and go to a front view, orthogonal. This my light switch is going to be, how big's my light switch? What's that? It's 3 inches by 5 inches. I think it's 3 by 5 inches. Let's extrude that by 1/2 inch. Cool. So that's my light switch. I'll put a little switch on there, I think. And let's extrude that by 15 millimeters. Let's just make, yeah, there we are. So we've got everything like that. So we'll select both of those and we'll go back to orthogonal and we're going to go modify, create symbol. Again, my symbol, all my dialog boxes are on the other screen. This is my light switch. So this is the part, Jim, where you go story aware relative to, where's light switches? Light switches, not story below, light switches, where's light switches? Not story above. I'm blind. Oh, there it is, light switches. So relative to my light switches level, do I want this to be above, positive, or below? I'm going to set it at 0. And I might as well stick this on my electrical class just in case. And I use a lot of classes, so I'm just going to choose a file that's already got my classes in it. I think this one's got them, maybe. So it's got services in it. No, I'll have to find another file. But if it had services, then it would be easy for me to grab the class from another file, which is really handy. So I'm just going to choose, I'm going to go to another file. I just don't want you to see where it is. We're using 2021, and I'm going to use my standards. So I've got a standards file that I've got here, and this has got all of my classes in it, which makes it real easy to go get service electrical lighting, or I can just use services electrical. And so now every time I use that symbol, it's going to automatically apply itself to that class. I won't have to think about it. It'll just do what I want. So I want that to be the next mouse click. So here, Jim, if you want it to be the object center in 3D, or the next mouse click. I'm going to make it the bottom of the object, which is there. And I should really put it in a new folder, which is electrical. Okay, so that should be story aware, that particular one. This is in floor 1, and we'll grab that symbol again, and we'll put that symbol in. And you'll notice that that symbol is sitting above the ground. So it's sitting at the 44 inches above the ground. If I go back to this level, floor 1, if I got, I think I'm in the wrong file, but never mind. Let's go stories, story 1, let's edit. Light switches should be at 44 inches. Now, it's going to change elevation, but it's such a small change you won't see it. So what I'm going to do is and you might notice when I made that change, it actually put another one in. Light switches, this one here. So I've got 2 light switches. That one's not active, this one is. So let's make it 24 inches, 600 millimeters. And we should see that that now drops down quite a bit lower. So you can see it's only 2 inches, 24 inches above the ground. So that gives me the ability to edit all of my light switches, get them all at the same elevation, or change it relative to that elevation, because I can still here, over this side of my screen, you can still see there's my Z reference. I can still move this light up and down relative to that light switch layer, level. So it becomes a really powerful technique if you use it accurately. So I hope, Jim, that makes sense with the levels, layers, and stories. Remember that they all connect together, and there's got to be a reason to use each one of them. You can use layers without using stories. You can use stories without using levels to control things like the light switches or the bottom of the cladding or the top of the cladding. But I think that perhaps for the time we've got, does that answer your question, Jim? And as well as that, does anyone else have any other questions about stories they want me to answer? So let's have a look. Stories so complicated. Any improvements to upgrading DTM? I have no idea. There's a nice one here from William about making a texture. So we've done, you've answered Amanda's. Jim, I think we talked about stories a lot. Someone wants to override the label. Okay, so who have we got? Mark. So Mark, you don't like the label that they've given you? I'm not sure if I've got, where's Tom's Cottage? Maybe I can go back to Tom's Cottage. Tom Cottage, here we are. So Mark, your problem is that you open up a 2012 version in 2021, and it updates all of your drawing labels. Is that right? And now you're going around selecting each of these, and you're going open this up, and then you're replacing this one with another one, replace with another label. Is that right, Mark? That's what you're doing? So I've got a different way of approaching this. So let's put that back. So instead of replacing each label, Mark, what about finding out what this label is, which is Tom's Cottage? And you should find that once you've done that replacement, it turns here into drawing label styles. That's this one here. And then you find the drawing label style that you want. Why not just edit this one here? And we'll go edit the label layout, and we'll start to remove bits. So I can remove that. I can move that one. I can change that one to center justified, I think. Make that center justified. Move that over there. Now get rid of the line. And one of the other comments you made was that this line here keeps changing its length. Oh, where is it? This line here. This line here keeps changing its length, and you don't like it because it's no longer consistent with your drawing style. Over here, you have the ability to constrain the object distance from the boundary of the right. And by turning the right off, you can adjust that label or adjust that length to suit your drawing style. I can change scale and I can move it somewhere else. I can change the font. Where's my favorite one? My favorite one's missing. Tecton Pro, there it is. So I'm going to make that Tecton Pro. I'm going to leave this whatever it is. I'm going to make it bold. And I'll just move it up here. I just make fun of it. No, there. So, and that title is certainly connected to the right side. Again, we have here the ability to text. It's not connected to the right, it's only connected to the left. Same with this one, only to the left. So I've now made changes to this. Why don't I get rid of that as well? And now, when I exit my drawing label, all my labels have updated in the entire file. And so that's a different way of thinking about it, Mark. Instead of replacing the label, edit the label, they'll all update. I just thought it'd be a quick way to do it. Make sure you don't save. Got to make sure I don't save this. I'm going to go, where's revert to saved? Now I use revert to saved in a situation like this because it takes me back to what the file looked like before I messed it all up. And I just thought that would fix your issue, Mark. So my suggestion would be, don't worry about replacing the labels. Don't worry about replacing the label styles. Change the label style to suit you. I'm afraid, Amanda, that there isn't a real standardized way for creating the placement for my label styles, but I tend to try to get them so that they line up. This is a little bit messy because they don't line up here, but I do like, I know it sounds a little pedantic, but I do like having my labels line up so that they go across. Sometimes I'll just draw a line across here and make sure I get them all lining up. But because you can grab that label, stick it on there, and then drag that across so it lines up. But you'll notice that I'm now quite high to the top of my screen, but it does look quite neat and tidy. Some people, Amanda, draw a grid for all their viewports, and I've tried that, but my details aren't always consistent. You can see that my ridge detail is wider than my eaves detail, and my barge detail is small relative to my eaves. So grids have never really worked for me because some details are small and some details are big, and some details need to be vertical and some need to go the other way. So I'm afraid, Amanda, I don't always end up with the labels where I want them. What I often do is, often what I'll do is I'll drag this across just to make a copy. Now I'm dragging it with I'm on a Macintosh, I'm dragging it with my Option key. If you're on a Windows machine, drag it with your Control key, and then I'll edit this and I'll edit the crop. So it'll go and find my other drawing or my other detail, which is this one over here. And you can see, Amanda, that my label is not consistent with my crop area. So I want that to be my crop area there. In fact, I decided eventually I didn't want to see that bit, and I don't need to see a whole bunch of that. And then I'll go right-click, edit annotations. There's my label, and I'll bring my label over. One of the things I do tend to do, Amanda, is I grab the label by that end, and I'll go to the edge of the crop area, and then I'll just make it come down from the edge of the crop area. Now, it's not giving me my smart cursor control, so let's have a look. Palettes, snapping. Some reason that's turned off. I want that turned back on again. So here, Amanda, I go to the bottom of my crop, and then I can come vertically down from that. And that gives me a nice consistency to my labels, where they relate to the edge of my crop area. This one doesn't, but let's go back to that one. Let's go to the bottom there. And you notice I get a little snap, so I can line up with that. And this one, maybe that one doesn't look so good pushed over to the left. So let's go to the edge of my crop, come down. It's one way of doing it, so they look consistent across there. But yeah, I quite often end up moving them. It's just one of the graphic styles that I like, but moving things around. In this particular project, one of the things that came up was the contractor also needed to know all of these little connection details. I just got out a felt tip pen and I drew them, scanned them, and dropped them in as an image. So that's a viewport with a scanned image in it. This is a viewport with a scanned image. And when you look at the layers that are on for this viewport, they're all turned off. So what I did was I just dragged a viewport over here, changed the name of it. This is, I have no idea what this is. I'll just call it imported image. Imported image. Let's have a look at my annotation. My annotation has a scanned image there. And I think I have somewhere. Now I've actually got something prepared for another discussion. So I'm just looking through my files, looking for something, Amanda, for you. EIT, non-consent. There should be some images. Okay. So Amanda, I've got some images here. I've got a stud strap, so let's drag that in. Let's import it. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to reference this. So this is importing and referencing something, which is really handy. So that's my stud strap there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crop that because that image is too big. And I'll just put a little crop area around there. Now this image is referenced, which means that if I open this image, it was the stud strap I think I opened, and that's a PDF file. If I edit that PDF file some way, I can then, any changes I make will update here as well. Now, have I got something I can edit it with? Let's open that. And I think I can draw red lines on it. Can I? Pink. That one. And I'm going to wiggly line that one. Now when I save that and I go back to my Vectorworks, that's my imported image there, you should notice that this is my referencing. If I update, I should end up with somewhere in there, maybe it's moved because of the crop that I put in there, but it should have updated that PDF for me. Where's it gone? Drawing label, viewport. I've lost my PDF now, stud strap. Well, it should have updated it. Now I can't remember where I put my stud strap. It was one of my drawings, I thought. That was my framing plan. It was this one here. So that stud strap should have updated. But that was one of the things you could, better revert to saved. I don't want to mess this file up. Revert to saved. So that would be another thing you can do, Amanda, for some of that stuff. Let's have a look. What are the steps for making so I want to do this one with making a Renderworks texture. So William, you got a question about making a Renderworks texture, which I wanted to cover. So William, for you, I've got a couple of different textures. I've got the color, and I've got a thing called a bump. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk about textures and bumps if we've got time. We might run out of time for this one, William. But there's 4 parts to a texture when you make a texture in Renderworks, a Renderworks texture. So I'm going to create a new resource in my active file. and it's a Renderworks texture, that one there. And there's 4 parts, so this is going to be planks. Planks. So there can be a color. So the color can be an image, it can be a color, so I can choose a color from Vectorworks. Let's go back to color, edit my color. I can choose a color, or I can choose an image. So I'm going to import an image file, and it was, I had it already, didn't I? It's in my Dropbox folder. Yeah. Now I've forgotten where it was now. It was this one here. What's that? 1105. 1105 textures, and it was image textures, texture images, and it was wood planks. And you have a look at this one, you go, whoops, that's the wrong one. So let's change that image. We'll import an image file, and it should be the one that was that one. So that's the color I'm using. And you can see it repeats, but there's also a little patch here where it repeats badly because there's a fading across there. Now I'm going to use this on a balcony which is about 6 feet wide, 1800 millimeters. And you'll notice that now my texture looks like nothing. So I'm going to change this image size here to about 1800 so that my preview, this is the size of my balcony, 1800, the boards will now look much better on it. My reflectivity, does this reflect? Is there some reflectivity that this uses? Can I import an image file? What if we import that one? What does that do to my reflectivity? And you can see now it's changed the glossiness of that. We might have no reflectivity since it's wood, it's not going to reflect. We could have transparency. Again, I can use an image mask. Let's import an image file for that. We'll use those ones there. Anything that's black will be see-through. Transparent color. So transparent color is black. Where's black? Not licorice. Maybe licorice will work. So mostly everything's black. We can play with our mapping of these. And we can see what's transparent and what's not transparent. And we should see through this a bit. So you can see now I can see through the gaps in my wood. And then we have this other thing called a bump. So I'm going to put that back to none. And the bump uses that same image. I can use that same bump image, this one here. Now what I can do is I can set the height of these things. Let's make that 10 millimeters high, half an inch. Let's make it 12 millimeters, half an inch. Self-shadowing. And let's have a look. So now you might notice that there's a bit of a lumpiness to that thing. This area here just changed its appearance. Okay. And we'll apply that planks to that object. Now you won't see the difference until we do a high quality rendering. Let's do final quality Renderworks. And you should notice that the black areas start to look like they're set into the object. Now we have to make sure we've checked out. Let's do custom Renderworks. And we'll do custom Renderworks options, all high, displacement mapping, anti-aliasing. And so you can see now that there's a definite lumpiness to that texture. It does look like it goes in and out a little bit. So the question was, are there steps for making a Renderworks texture for a siding material? Yes, there is. You need an image to start with, and then you need something, I call it a bump map, because that's the bump is what Vectorworks calls that sort of lumpiness part of it. And the bump then controls the in and out part of the siding. Now, one of the tricks with the in and outer part of the siding is to use a gradient image. If it's siding which is bevel back boards, you can use a gradient to gradually taper those boards. I wonder if I've got a texture that does that. Let's have a look. Renderworks textures. I thought I had my own texture for bevel back boards, but I may not have. I've got some textures. I think my brick's got one of these brick ones. I think I've got the bevel back. Sorry, it's got the bump map on it. I don't seem to see my displacement mapping. Yeah. I'm just not getting my lumpiness the way that I normally do. But I use the same thing with that texture. So if we look at that texture, Untitled 1, and we look at this texture, let's edit that texture. Oh, this one's got no bump. That's what it is. So one of these bricks that I created does have a texture to it. And it's got that lumpiness to it, so you can see the bricks go in and out. And I thought it was that one. Troweled concrete, has that one got that lumpiness to it? Which is quite cool. So it definitely starts to look lumpy over here. So that would be one of my suggestions, is you make sure you've got those parts, and you do need to make sure that the bump lines up with the color that you're choosing. But you could choose a color and just a bump without having the color represent the lines as well. If you're using the color to represent the lines, they have to line up. I can't remember whether, so those are the bricks we looked at. Some of these are standard Vectorworks ones, which I haven't worried about. So let's have a look. So William, does that answer your question about creating the siding panel? I think, Mark, I've answered your question about the drawing label. I don't think we've got time to answer the question, Barbara, about materials, other than doing it really quick. I'm just reading through them. Someone asked me, do I use a modified version of the architecture template? I've built one from scratch. Who's that? David. So David, I use my template from scratch just about. You'll also notice that it's got pens already built in it. I've got a reset command which resets and puts labels on things. It resets. This reset one resets about 80 different preferences. I've got a feeling we've talked about that once before. Show all classes is a little utility I made. I've got the ability to label roof zones. I can create details, and so my template has layers and classes already set up in it. I've got several classes already created that are specifically designed to speed up my construction of details. So if I want to draw concrete, I just start drawing, and my concrete fills in with the right class. It's got the right detail concrete in it, and it's got a texture in it. You can't see the texture because it's so small. But it does fill in the texture for me, which is really handy. I've got, if I need to draw flashing, I've got a special class for that. And if I need to draw things like rebar or block work, it'll just CMU, then these things just work really well for me. So just a bunch of little utilities that I created. So David, the answer is, yeah, I use a modified version. You can change Vectorworks, why not change it? You'll also, no one's really pointed it out or noticed, but I've got a customized interface here. My grid line tool is there. This is my extract tool. My data tag is there. My revision cloud is there. David, we haven't got time. I'd love to do creating those utilities. How about next month? Bring that up really at the beginning, David, and we'll make sure we cover how I create all these little utilities, because they're really powerful. And they, yeah, so David, come next month. And make sure that you come early. Make sure you put that as the first question, and we'll try and remember to cover that, because I think that they really speed up your use of Vectorworks. You know, things like snap to loci is a great thing. If you have a look at my snaps, David, just quickly, I got snaps for designing, and you see all my snaps turn on. When I'm dimensioning, if you have a look, my snaps have just turned off. Not have they just turned off, but I've also turned off a bunch of these ones as well as part of that utility. So when I want to design, I turn that back on, and all those snaps turn back on again. Vectorworks is powerful in its ability to customize. And I customize, I don't know if you guys have realized, but I also customize my interface. So things like roof faces here, decompose, compose. I got rid of all the stuff at the top here, copy and paste. I mean, I make a lot of viewports, so I had to create a viewport there. So please, David, we'll talk about it next week. So I've answered. So I annotated in the model layer and showed the viewport at the same scale. Who's that? Oh, it's my friend Ramon. Yes, Ramon. I do that because if you ever look at my details, I've got a detail layer for all my 1 to 5 and 1 to 10 details. So these are all my 1 to 5 details. And I've got them all drawn here. And the reason I draw them all here, Ramon, is because I quite often want to copy a bit from here to here. I have to make little bits and pieces. I've got to copy the notes from here to there. For me, it can be a bit of a hassle trying to. These all went a bit strange as well. I don't know why, but they all ended up with double lines. But you know, I've got all those different bits, and now when you see my utilities, when you see me use my utilities, it makes sense why they're all there. Where's my palettes? Drawing tools, drawing details. So when I want to draw my drywall, where have they gone? Yeah. So if I want to draw drywall, gibboard we call it. See that, David? It comes out exactly the right size. If I need to draw a rigid air barrier on there, so everything it just speeds up the way I draw, so I can create those bits and pieces. Really handy. And of course, my pieces are timber symbols. There's a class that controls the style of that. This little object is a symbol. It's called a CPC40, and it's for bolting down my rafters. And I had to create a whole lot of these little joist hanger things as well, which I just imported, and they're just a little 2D symbol. And as part of making symbols, you might notice I've created a little locus, a little 2D locus there, and I made it so that it was real easy to snap to the bottom of my rafter, and then that little multi-plate, multi-grip it's called, it just sticks in exactly the right place. So it's really handy to do that kind of stuff. So Amanda, I think I've answered your questions. And I've answered Mark's questions and Jim's questions. The answer, yeah, I've answered the question about my template. We haven't got time to talk about materials at the moment, but briefly, materials, they have auto-assigned textures. They're not used mainly for walls. They're used for all kinds of other. How are we getting on for time, Barbara? We're nearly finished. I can't see my file. I'm looking for a file called What You Get. But the way that I had it explained to me, Bob, is that materials are taking the job of a lot of the classes we used to use to control the look and style of things like wall components. But they're much broader than that. When we look at materials, if we look at a structural member, that structural member, when we go to select the shape, we can apply our material to it. This is, where's galvanized? Where's Gal's not there. Galvanized metal. Okay, so that now controls the look of that piece of steel. If we use columns, we can apply it to columns. If we use I'm not sure if we can use it on stairs yet. There's a stair object. If we look at this in 3D, where's the graphic attributes? I don't think our graphic attributes yet have caught up with these. So the front face, let's edit that. Oh, there it is. So you can use a material on your stair if you want to. So you can actually apply materials to the parts of the stair. And if you apply materials to parts of the stair, let's go back to that. Graphic attribute, front edge, let's edit that. If you chose a material, let's choose a wood. Bamboo, that'd be nice. So let's apply bamboo. You'll notice, Bob, that not only does it control the graphic, the texture of that material, but it also controls the color and the fill of it. It doesn't control the pen, but it does control the material texture. And so what you could do is you could edit all of these and just add the bamboo as a material, and it's controlling the look of that. What do we want? Bamboo, wasn't it? Wood. Put the bamboo on there, and you can see it's got it's controlling the color of that thing. This one's ended up galvanized. That should really be wood. So I think materials are a beginning of a very nice ability of Vectorworks to apply another attribute to your objects. It's not a class. It's something different from that. So you can have things on different classes, but the same material. And I think maybe we need to, at some point, Barbara, do materials. Didn't we do materials with one of my webinars?
Yeah, we did. So if you go back on our YouTube channel and you look at all we have a playlist with all Jonathan's webinar, and you can find it there.
And I'm sorry, Amanda, but I didn't answer your question about your shared file with the resources in it. That's a more complicated one, and I'd need to do quite a lot of work to get it all set up. But I would, if you're in an office, I'd use a workgroup library. I'm not sure about Dropbox for a workgroup library. But yeah, something like a workgroup library on your computer, on your network would work, or maybe something like a referenced file would be another way to do it, where you reference in the symbols from a library which is next to your project file. So hopefully, William, I've answered your question. And Amanda, I'm sorry I'm ever so brief with answering yours. I'm sorry about that. I think that's probably it for today, Barbara. Just remind people
Jonathan.
I mean, it'd be nice if people looked at my YouTube channel as well. I've got a YouTube channel with several movies on it, probably hundreds. But don't forget to have a look at my knowledge base and see what I've got going here. If anyone's running an office and they do subscribe to this, there is a Vectorworks Foundation course. So this is my beginner course for Vectorworks 2021, and it's got all the parts. It's basically the manual that I used to write for Vectorworks available there on my website. You can only get it if you subscribe, I'm sorry, but I think it's good value. You get that course. I've started adding, I think, the 3D modeling course as well. Beginner topics, working planes, extrusion, sweep. This is how much I've got so far. There's quite a lot on there still. Drape surface, auto. I think there's a lot of stuff there, Barbara. I think it's well worth it.
Excellent value, I agree. Yes, let me make this smooth transition to something else that is excellent value. Let me take the screen back.
We've got a special offer.
So smooth. Our special offer. Hold on, I don't know why I can't make transition to my screen. That's okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can see pick up Vectorworks question and answer number 8.
Okay. Yeah, because I can't see anything. Everything is locked on my end. Anyway, I just want to remind you that we have a special code giving out today to add an extra 10% discount to your Vectorworks purchase. So if you're taking advantage of the promotion that we have going on, the flash promo only that will end on Friday, You can purchase a new or upgrade your license for 40% off. And on top of that, you can add another 10% off with our promo code that I shared on our chat, but I will read it to you one more time. VWJP22321. For today only, expires at 6 p.m. Add it to your card and save big time. Thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you,
And
everybody. Thanks for having me.
we'll yeah, we'll see you again and in a month. So, hold on to your questions and bring them up again. And looking forward to it already.
So,
Bye bye, everybody.
Barbara, do you mind if they email you ahead of time?
I would love that. Barbara@novage.com. Just anytime, I will collect a question and so we can start. The next Q&A on the right foot. Okay, Barbara
Thank
at
you.
novage.com. Thank you, everybody. Bye
Bye.
bye.